Dataset Presentation A1. We respect and acknowledge traditional custodians of the land and waters which our Curtin University Bentley campus students are educated upon, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge and pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. The focus of this research is to use current and available data to understand the current climate of secondary education attendance and engagement of Indigenous students in a national, state, and local context, and drive improvement towards the explored trends through a strategic action plan. Comprehensive analysis of Indigenous secondary school attendance rates from the Australian Closing the Gap report, Australian Bureau of Statistics, and Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority displays a common trend, which the attendance rate of Australian and Torres Strait Islander students is significantly lower in comparison to non-Indigenous students at a national level. This exact percent is 11. The trend of low attendance is found statewide in all year grades. However, this trend strengthens, and in year 7 and onwards, there is a significant decline in attendance for students years 7 to 10. To explore this trend at a local level, 3 secondary schools have been identified in the Swan region of the Perth metropolitan area in Western Australia. These schools include Swan View Senior High School, Averley Second College, and Ellenbrook Secondary College. These schools display that Indigenous attendance rates are approximately 15% lower in comparison to non-Indigenous students at their respective schools. The national average for Indigenous attendance is 82%. At the selected school, the combined average is 66%, which shows us that at a local level, the same trend is occurring in a larger population. It is evident from the data collected on all levels that there are low Indigenous attendance rates. While being highly informative, the data collected proves to have limitations. As it's quantitative, it doesn't display the reasons behind these low student attendance rates. It also does not identify the recurrence of these reasons at the state and federal levels. Therefore, qualitative and quantitative data must be collected and reviewed on the reasons for low Indigenous student attendance rates at the 3 selected local secondary schools. This will allow evidence and database plans to be developed in increasing low secondary school attendance rates among our Indigenous students. The model that has been selected for the strategic plan is Eastern Cycle of Inquiry. Stage 1 of Eastern Cycle includes using data to identify the problem. Stage 2 requires the identification of possible solutions to the problem. Stage 3 examines the progress of implemented solutions. And Stage 4 uses research data to examine its impact on Stage 1. Eastern Cycle has been chosen as it's highly effective, allowing for continuous monitoring of progress so that feedback can be provided for ongoing structural development of the strategic plan. Teachers must utilize credible evidence to inform their practice. Data-driven decision-making incorporates data to make evidence-based decisions. This provides validity and reliability for decision-making. It does not incorporate anecdotal data as it's susceptible to false perceptions, bias, and error-making decisions. To discover the reasons for low attendance rates among Indigenous students at a local level, both qualitative and quantitative records of data will need to be collected and cross-referenced between the 3 selected schools. This ensures the strategic plan outcomes will have a high chance of accomplishing higher Indigenous student attendance rates. As highlighted by the Australian Institute of Aboriginal Studies Code of Ethics Policy and Department of Education data strategy, there are specific ethical requirements that must be adhered to when collecting data involving Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. On a broad scale, all data must be collected voluntarily, maintaining confidentiality and privately being stored, monitoring personal access to data. Informed consent to collect data must be obtained from student parents or guardians. Regarding the scope of data being collected, in regards to collecting data from Indigenous students, schools are required to collaborate with local Indigenous communities and household and authorities, as well as elders, to formulate data collection practices that follow Indigenous protocol and maintain cultural sensitivity. This includes the type of information a school can ask a student for. The objective of the strategic plan is to increase the attendance of Year 7 to 10 Indigenous students across the 3 schools within the Swan region from 66% to 75% across 2 years. To achieve this, Eastern's inquiry cycle is essential for collecting attendance data to be frequently collected and at stage 3 of the cycle to be repeatedly reviewed at a minimum of once every month to examine the effectiveness of active solutions devised from stage 2 and in turn make adjustments to the strategic plan if results aren't evident. Both forms of data must be ethically collected to determine the reason contributing to low Indigenous attendance rates. Once these problems have been identified, the three schools and interrelated stakeholders, including selected school staff, respective parents, citizen committee members, community elders, and the National Indigenous Australian Agency, must collaboratively devise methods to increase the attendance rate to 75%. Stakeholder collaboration and consistent monthly reviews of new data are paramount to the success of this plan. The Indigenous enrolment figures of Swan Valley Senior High School, Ellenbrook Senior High School, and Averley Second College see 138, 89, and 111 students enrolled. The context of Upper Swan region sees a low Indigenous population density under 5%, meaning the suburb is not heavily populated with Indigenous communities. Furthermore, there is an underdeveloped infrastructure of resource to provide support for Indigenous people. Examples of this underdeveloped infrastructure that has a direct impact on students being able to attend school include limited public transport network. ABS shows a low 1.9% of residents accessing public transport on a weekly basis. Expensive cost of living prices also have a drastic effect on student attendance rates, as students may not be able to afford resources and food for school. This actually has severe psychological effects, increasing the frequency of wagging to avoid embarrassment and bullying. For Indigenous households, there is a median income of $1,170, with the rent mortgage repayments being $2,060 a month, in comparison to the income of $1,480 of non-Indigenous households and $1,700 median monthly rent mortgage repayments monthly. So there's actually a drastic difference that Indigenous households are paying more in mortgage repayments and have a lower income. Secondary school-based issues reducing Indigenous attendance include increased cases of dangerous behaviour seen at Swan Valley Senior High, poor integration of Indigenous Australian education into mesh subjects, and restricted access to Indigenous and based assistance programs in school that don't cater to low-performing students, such as the Follow the Dream program at Swan Valley Senior High School. Now, this is a great initiative that should be opened up to all Indigenous students regardless of academic performance. This problem is also further increased by inadequately prepared teachers to teach Indigenous Australian education. By the qualitative and quantitative data research, the following strategic-based solutions have been made to address these problems. Firstly, finding readily available qualitative data on the reasoning for low attendance in high school was so uncommon. The first plan of action is to further collect qualitative data, specifically informally interviewing Indigenous students to gain insights for low attendance that can be tallied up into specific categories like a bad curriculum, bullying and harassment within the school. Data can be collected through forums and surveys of related personnel. Now, locally, public transport plans and funding appeals are dealt with on a state council level. Secondary schools and communities should push and work with the City of Swan for funding grants through the Western Australian Move Your Schools grant program. However, changing the public transport infrastructure of a region is not a viable solution for a short 2-year program. Instead, schools should reprioritise their budgets, allowing room for purchasing bikes that can be handed out to Indigenous students struggling with the cost of living and transport-related problems, with work-based incentives like increased attendance and performance. Furthermore, extra public school funding can be contributed towards the purchase of a private school-owned bus to assist with drop-offs and pickups. This is also a potential avenue for a job. Another solution would be to increase the practical integration of Indigenous education into mesh subject curriculum with the involvement of the wider Indigenous community. Examples include Indigenous historical perspectives from elders in the HAS curriculum, or Indigenous land and country learning into earth and biological sciences, like the Karrakin black cockatoo incursion. Research shows an inclusive school curriculum culture that makes First Nations students feel valued and safe is vital in supporting Indigenous students' attendance and engagement. So this is something that needs to be fostered among the teachers. To expand on this topic, adequate professional development should be implemented for school staff in relation to Indigenous Australian education, in which they are exposed to the history, culture, current lifestyle, and enduring characteristics of the Indigenous students' context. Those are my references.